This is the Nomad Futurist podcast, a podcast about the evolution of technology, society, and transformation. Connect with us, share your thoughts with us at nomadfuturist.com. Let's get this started. Here are Phill and Nabil. Hello. Welcome to Nomad Futurist podcast. This is your host, Nabil Mahmood from Kona, Hawaii.
This is Philip Koblenz, your co-host from Montclair, New Jersey.
And this is Phill Lawson-Shanks calling in from Plano, Texas.
Thank you very much for joining us. Let's start to get to know you a little bit. How did you get started and where you're at in your career?
Sure. Well, how long have we got? Because it's a long and spotted history. And I do a lot of speaking, but I don't usually talk about this part. And I should. But obviously, my accent, I'm not native. I was born and grew up in the UK.
I was this close. I was so convinced.
Just a little bit, yeah. I was born and grew up in the UK, and I discovered later in life that I'm dyslexic, which explained an awful lot about the confusion I had during school. And in the UK system at that point, we would finish school at 16, go to college, then university. I had a very confusing time at school. I was invited to leave college after being there for about a year, and then just went into industry, I think. I was released to industry from the education system. So I jumped around, I did lots of different things, but I ended up working at a company that owned and operated all the airports in the UK, British Airports Authority. It's gone since, but did some interesting jobs. During that time, they were, all of the airports had their own mainframe, an old ICL mainframe. And you can tell how old I am now by talking about that. And they were having a lot of graduates come in and doing work in the IT group, you're programming COBOL and Quick Build and Fortran and the like. And they were obviously very skilled, but they didn't understand the business aspects of the industry that they were moving into. So some people had the forethought of looking to the industry, the company themselves, and given the opportunity for people to apply for a training position of a year. And out of the several hundred across the whole of the country that applied, 8 of us, I was one of the 8 that were selected, and spent a year, well, actually not quite the full year, learning everything from programming COBOL and Quick Build and Fortran. And then we had various secondments within the business doing things. One that I took on was to identify and select a local area networking product. And from the choices of Banyan, if you remember Banyan, LAN Manager, LAN Server, and Novell. So I chose Novell, and we ended up deploying that across the industry. So at that point in time, there was that migration from the mainframe to the mini systems. We learned, I programmed a PDP-11 and all of that. It was... But then LAN servers were sort of coming up. PC servers were on the rise. So I ended
This is mid 80s at this point?
This is mid 80s, yeah, mid 80s. So started deploying Novell, and we were sort of offloading applications that would take it all night to run on the ICLs, that we would then moving them down to systems. And to be frank, most of the systems we put in were print servers because it was just easier. There was a migration from dot matrix to laser printers. Again, I'm really showing my age here, but
I'm trying to determine whether I should even make a dot matrix joke, because I'm not sure any of our listeners would even know what that is. But there used to be these little pieces of paper on the side of the printers.
Exactly.
The holes that used to
across
anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not worth it.
So anyway, did all of that, and I was then recruited from that role to go and work for a European manufacturer called Tulip Computers. Again, no longer there. They touted themselves as the European Compaq. Again, Compaq was no longer around, but so it did some fantastic things there. And
there's only one common thread with all these companies that aren't around that I'm picking up on.
Yeah. So let me think back on that. Let's not go there. Or maybe I had the foresight to jump before, but anyway,
maybe.
Did things there. I set up a training division. I went over to Düsseldorf and to Rotterdam and did some training. I was certified as a Novell instructor, and I was configuring, installing, and I built a system that enabled us to basically, if you remember, you probably don't, but in the early days of Novell, there was 50 odd floppy disks you had to install in the server to set it up. I automated that with some programming. So you literally just put in the one key disk and everything just built. So we were able to take an order for a server and within 3 hours have it configured and shipped out the door. So next day delivery. So LAN in a can, we called it. So which was interesting.
It's also, if you think about it from a timing perspective, to say that was early on. Now everybody expects, a computer to be at their doorstep instantaneously in our new kind of Amazon Prime culture. Exactly. That's applied across every industry. If I don't know the context that our audience has for this sort of thing, but that seems like at that time would have been revolutionary compared to what the traditional kind of manufacturing build times, not even manufacturing, just installation times. I remember the early days of Windows when you had 32 floppy disks and you had to sit there and install it. And it's basically days long events just to install an operating system. So good thinking.
Yeah, thank you.
I met an individual the other day, and he was a computer scientist in the UK. And all what he did for the 10 years that he worked at BAA was press buttons. Yep. That was his job. After school, you went into special trades. How did you end up picking computing?
Oh, it's funny. I ended up as a security guard, basically TSA. It's slightly different in the UK. Europe had some different issues. And I won't go into it in too much detail as well, this might get flagged. But the training we had was fascinating. We worked with the bomb disposal units and things like that. But I did that for a while. And I say the BA decided they wanted to recruit from internal to basically see if anyone had the aptitude. They would teach them how to bring them into the IT group. So everything just clicked. It just seemed very easy for me. I'm a very, very visual thinker. So I can visualize the electron flow in a chip or all of that. And pattern recognition is something that comes very easy to me. Spelling, not so much, because that's a two-dimensional
right. And that's the thing. Is that really is the dyslexia kind of demarcation point? Like, you didn't have exposure to that sort of thing when you were in grade school and before university, and it was difficult because you had no idea why the things that came easy to others were difficult for you. And then once you were just introduced to this sort of computing methodology where you had to visualize these things that would be incredibly complex for people that were surpassing you in the things that one would think were mundane, just came naturally. Is that kind of the idea of the dyslexic mind? Yeah, amazing.
Exactly. And then there was a brief time when I was at college. We leased time on the county mainframe, and we had teletype. So I was programming, and it was producing type that actually punch holes in the tape. But every time I spot something wrong, I'd have to then put in the delete that last command. So my programs were incredibly long, as you can imagine. So and they didn't run very well. But anyway, once I got beyond that, but typing is interesting because instead, if you think there's lots of different views on dyslexia, but essentially it comes down to the fact that you can't visualize anything in 2 dimensions. You can visualize in 3 dimensions. So you can't visualize a word, but you can visualize the image of the word. So when you're trying to spell a word and write it down, you have to think, well, what letter is that? Where does that come? Where do I start that on the page with a pen? But in typing, it's a 3-dimensional movement in space. So and also spell checkers and Grammarly and is that something to this day that you struggle with, or is it something that you essentially train yourself to kind of work around? Yeah, you develop coping mechanisms. So yes, so just move forward. But in terms of the visualization, that's still. It serves me greatly in what I do.
It's fascinating because you would think that it's a way to almost recruit from the computing industry and you compute almost towards dyslexia because it's almost a tell that you would you may succeed in our world, certainly in the world of programming and this kind of 3-dimensional visualization by virtue of having dyslexia. So
structured thinking. So GCHQ, the British equivalent to the NSA, they recruit heavily from the dyslexic community because that different type of thinking serves them well. And very strong pattern recognition, which sort of helped me find the next interesting thing to move to throughout my career. So anyway, did all of that, worked for a Dutch company. That was fun. I was recruited to go and work at Compaq. And I was actually the first person they'd hired who didn't have a university degree, which was interesting. So did a lot of interesting things there, a lot of systems engineering, consultancy, and was.
So is that what brought you to the US?
It was, yeah. I was offered either a place to go and run something in in Munich, in the European headquarters, or into Houston, which was the global headquarters. So, and I'd always had this thing about living in America. Most of British television is American, so I wanted that Brady Bunch, double door, sunken lounge, all of that. I hadn't actually got that, but that was very appealing to me. So I dragged my family over from the UK. We went to live in Houston, and I ran some things there. And that was a lot of fun. Spent a lot of time with Microsoft, launched Windows 2000 for the company. That was exciting. And just jumped around. I found lots of interesting technologies, saw the need for Wi-Fi. We worked on Starbucks, identifying Starbucks as the next place, that middle place from the home and the office, the third place. And launched that.
So you invented the Edge, the first edge computing where Starbucks.
We can get interesting. Yeah, and that was a lot of fun. We did the merger with HP, and it was just different for me. The culture was different at that point. At that point in time, HP is a different entity now, but I liked the cowboy mentality of seeing 10 opportunities in the market and going after them, knowing you probably get 3, but the revenue you derive from those 3 would more than offset any sunk cost in those other 7. I ended up leaving with the CEO of Compaq. So back in you remember WorldCom, all those guys, bad things happened. They went to jail, and they approached the CEO of Compaq to fix it. So I went along with him and 4 others and ended up moving in the old UUNet building. That became headquarters. So met some fascinating people, like Vin, you've had on your show, sure. And Henry Senrek, who invented SIP, and all amazing brains.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that was really that was your first foray into an actual. You could not find a better network company at that time than UUNet. UUNet was the gold standard for all networks.
Yeah. So we renamed WorldCom back to MCI, and it had all of those assets. In fact, I remember I was commuting. There was, at the time, BMW were producing these little vignettes where they had a particular actor driving a car around. They're different directors, and they would take hours to download. And late one night I was there, and I thought, I'll see if there's any new ones. And I downloaded one, and it was, what took hours was down in less than a minute. And I thought, that's interesting. And then I met with some brilliant people who I said, explain how this works. Teach me the internet. And after a day and a half, I said, that's it. My brain is full. I can't take any more. And I'll give you their names. They're amazing people you should have on their show. But did a lot of things there, which was fascinating. And I've always had an interest in media and content. In fact, I actually wanted to be a stuntman when I was at school. I've got a crazy passion for doing stupid things. But I hurt my back in a bad rugby accident. So I couldn't do any sports. And I've subsequently done crazy things, which we can talk about.
We'll get to the crazy things section of the podcast in a bit.
Yeah, but I saw the need to move content over the internet. And so I came up with a plan, proposed it, was allowed to create a startup within the new MCI, and went on basically looking around, cherry picking the best people that were still there, and then bought a couple of companies and created a thing called Digital Media Services, which is now Verizon Digital Media Services. So we did that from just me. Within 6 months, I had 100 people. We did some fascinating work with some Hollywood names, some digital dailies for some interesting movies. And that was a lot of fun. But then the plan was always to monetize those assets and sell them to Quest or to Verizon. Verizon they acquired it. And that was very much at that point, very much a telecom company. And that didn't interest me so much.
Sure.
So I left and went with the chief strategy officer to work at Savis. We were doing a turnaround of Savis. That was fascinating. And I was looking for a grid type computing environment so that we could tolerate server failure. And I found this little company called VMware that was sort of just nascent. Did a deal with them. We devised the first virtual machine as a service.
So then you invented the cloud. Got it.
Well, I did have an idea about that later. I invented some other things. I got some patents for things, but I'm not laying claim to that.
You invented creating a computer basically exponentially quicker than anyone else had. And then you invented the edge. And now you invented the cloud. I think the dyslexic minds are clearly the geniuses of our time.
Well, because I don't understand the structure and sequential thinking, so I just jump and go and do things. Things they look like they'll work, and I don't take no for an answer. So anyway, did a lot of things there. That was fun. Subsequent to that, we had a restructuring. I took a year off, fully paid, but got very, very bored. So built a photography service for car dealers. I built a whole system where we take high resolution cars, and anyway, that was fun. That
was your hobby. Your hobby
it was photography. It was I like cars.
Your hobby was creating Carvana.
Yeah. Well before. Yeah. But then I did a stint at Alcatel-Lucent, which was really interesting. Came up with some ideas there. I'm not going to, because anything I say now, you're going to say I invented, but
it's true. I mean, I'm not saying it because you're bloviating. I'm saying because it's actually true. I think you are there's not nearly enough patents listed on your LinkedIn. This is crazy.
Yeah, that was fun. I saw the need to, virtualize the stack, the telecom stack. So we did that, and that was interesting. But the travel to Paris, all of that, it was different. They have different regulations.
This has become the most bourgeois conversation. I couldn't handle the travel to Paris. It was just too much for me.
It was just too much. Yeah. So I did a startup, which was fascinating, but that didn't work. Which I think you should always have one under your belt, one that doesn't work.
Right.
And then I took a CTO role at a hosting company, and that was a lot of fun. That was, again, another turnaround at Fix. I like fixing complicated problems. Did that for a year or so, and then a friend of mine reached out and said he'd just joined this company called EdgeConneX, and they were going to fix the internet, and convinced me to come and join. And that was a lot of fun. That was because at that point, there were about 9 points in America where all the internet traffic tromboned back and forth from. And Netflix had just bought a new catalog of content, which was basically crushing things, that spinning wheel of death.
Right.
So we set about buying properties and designing and deploying smaller scale data centers, 2 meg, 3 meg, 4 meg in various markets, and then bringing peering and just basically change internet flow, which was a lot of fun. In fact, in the first 24 months, we built 23 of them, which was manic. But that was,
I mean, that's again, it makes perfect sense since you previously had invented the edge. Now you get to build all the data centers. It's perfect.
True. No, I won't lay claim to that at all, but that was fun. And then I did that for, a couple of years and always looking at new technologies, new ways of doing things. But it became really apparent to me that, and the hyperscalers, they'd been buying vast amounts of land out in Oregon and North Carolina and building enormously sophisticated big data centers where land and power was cheap. But then they realized that latency was an issue for them. So they wanted instances of their platforms closer. So we were doing that for them. And just looking at how they were laying out their footprints, you would always design a data center or a suite to the maximum cooling capacity. And the technology of the day was cracks and cores and so on. So that really limited the footprint. And knowing what was happening with the chipsets, the emergence of GPUs, it became apparent that whatever we built for these guys, within 18 months, they would want to double their power or certainly increase their power significantly. And you can always bring more power into a building as long as you do the right things for the community and whatever. But your cooling is a fixed entity that's going to be offset by the capitalization of the building over so many years, but you can't really change that. So I started looking at different things, and that took me down to a path. I'd met Andrew, the CEO of Aligned, before. We'd been on panels together, and really enjoyed him as a human being. And it just came out. We were at some iMasons event, and he asked me what I was doing, whether I was bored, and I was. So,
of course you're bored. You haven't invented like a critical part of society in months.
Well, I don't think I've done that for a while. But anyway, so he invited me to come across, and I've been doing this over here and really enjoying just changing again how you can maximize the floor space for what's coming, for GPUs with supercomputers now, all the things that are happening. Because traditional data center layouts, you might get 25 kilowatts in a middle couple of cabinets, but on average it's like 6. Whereas what we do now is up to 50 or beyond if we go water cooled. If we loop those into the Cray systems, we can go up to 250 kilowatts a cabinet. So it's crazy capacity. And for me, that's really interesting. Just to help the true people who are changing how we all live and breathe. And, this Zoom, the change from last year where everyone's working from home or remotely, how Teams and Google, Meet and all of these things had to just dramatically increase. So we think about that and we think, it must be the internet. But the servers behind that, the service this, are extraordinary. So being able to help them deliver their assets more readily, that's exciting. And if I get bored again, I'll do something else. But no, I'm really...
You hear that, Andrew? He's on the market.
No, I'm really enjoying this. This is probably one of the most fun I've had in a very long time.
If there's one thing or one word to describe Phill Lawson-Shanks, that is innovation. Quite a journey in the last 40 years from being a security guy and pretty much touching every single element of data infrastructure. If there are one or two core lessons that you have learned that you can share with the audience, what would those be? What would you do differently, knowing which today? Granted that you've got a ridiculous amount of patents and that you've invented edge and cloud and God knows what else. What would you do differently, Phill, if you knew what?
I don't know what I'd do differently. I've really enjoyed what I've done. I've always had the latitude to think differently and just come up with crazy ideas. I've had some fantastic CEOs that I worked for. What have I done differently? No, I don't thrive in large corporates. So I like the scrappiness of the startup, the turnaround, the smaller entity, and like looking at bringing it to that stage, at that pivot point where it's going to become something enormous, and then look for the next thing. So
one of the things
I probably would have taken skydiving up a bit earlier. That's probably what it would.
Oh, we haven't gotten to the skydiving yet. One of the things that I heard over and over again when you described your career path was fun. Yes. And I think that a lot of the kind of younger generation, maybe the generation that entered the workforce in the last 5 or 10 years, doesn't necessarily equate with work, is the idea of fun and how much more productive you can be when you like what you're doing and when you have the freedom and the confidence to kind of blaze your own path, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, and how much runway you can essentially build yourself if you don't get trapped in that kind of corporate methodology of just kind of doing what you're told and looking at things with blinders on and just doing your job and punching your card and going home. How much of that do you think was based on you kind of pushing some of the bosses or leadership in the organizations that you worked in? And how much of it was just by happenstance you happened to be at the right place at the right time and the right person noticed you? What do you think of that?
And I think that's a trap that I think a lot of people who've achieved a modicum of success, where they attribute their success to everything that they've done. And I think this context is everything. But it's the ability just recognize that and jump. So being prepared to buckle down and do what needs to be done, but also if there's an opportunity to do it differently and to convince whoever that power broker is that there's a better way or a different way, or in fact just throw that away and do this over here. So communication skills are important, being able to read people and timing. But I've just been incredibly fortunate. And I have an accent, so people think I'm smart.
Oh, no question about it. I can only imagine the Texas twang that you are covering up with that.
Oh, yes.
That Madonna-like British accent.
You mentioned when you went to work for Hewlett-Packard and Compaq, you were one of the very first employees that didn't have a college degree. Where do you think we are? We've got more liberal art degrees that we are issuing these days, and education has not changed since the second industrial revolution. Do we need to change and start thinking more around the lines of trade schools?
I think about that a lot, actually. I'm struggling to remember the guy's name. There's a British guy in education. He has a lot of TED Talks. He talks about how the education system is the perfect vehicle for creating university professors. And if you extend that all the way out, that's what you're going to become. Now, having said that, education's vitally important. In fact, one of the things that I spend a lot of time reading and learning, because there are gaps in my knowledge base, which I'm constantly looking to fill. And I always thought that if I get to the point where I have to retire, which I hope I never have to do, I'll probably go and take some college courses because it'd be interesting. There are some things that I'd really like to learn. But I do think there's a place where we should have more secondments. In fact, one of the things that we do, we have a lot of interns in our company. So we pull them from all different walks of life. And it's more an aptitude. And that is very, very personal. If you're prepared to learn and prepared to, actually step forward and don't expect things to come your way, then I'll spend as much time as possible with you. And so we have a lot of interns like that. And not being ageist, and you're the Gen X and I'm on the Gen X and the millennials and the Zs or the Zs. I can say that.
Oh, yeah. Of course you can.
There's a lot of people, but even for our industry, if you look at the makeup of the data center market, it's people who look like me, for the most part. And unless we change that, we're going to age ourselves out of the industry. So we're constantly trying to pull in more diverse, younger people in, and it's exciting. And the data centers are truly the engines of the fourth industrial revolution. And there's so much going on that you can do.
Enter the Nomad Futurist. You just dictated exactly what our purpose for being is. And I think, I think anyone that listens to your story can be nothing but inspired by how fast you've been able to kind of reinvent yourself as a huge thinker in our world, in large part because you were given the space to kind of think differently about the way things are done. And what I am envisioning is like a real benefit to our industry for that sort of thinking, like because it's not finance and it's not this kind of there's a lot of spreadsheet manipulation that goes along in our industry, of course, with M&A and private equity and all that stuff. Yeah. But in general, there's such a wide breadth of skill set and capability in so many different ways to achieve things like cooling efficiencies and productivity increases on compute workloads and reducing of latencies and things that you were able to see and solve for in ways that are incredibly creative. That's another thing people don't necessarily attribute to our industry is the amount of creativity that you can express in what you're doing. So again, the one thing that I would be incredibly upset with is if you manage to go into some other industry. I think we are the perfect landing spot for your type of creative mind, and I think it's certainly inspirational to the next generation.
Oh. Thank you. I hope so. And again, so I think my details are here. If anyone wants to reach out and talk to me afterwards, I'd be happy to do that. I don't think we do enough mentoring in our industry.
What advice would you give the younger generation that's trying to figure out what they want to be when they grow up?
Well, I've always taken the view that I intend never to grow up. Growing old is inevitable, but growing up is optional. And I think that mindset is important. But I think you need to find what you love doing. It's an old adage, find what you love and then do it. If someone's prepared to pay you to do what you love doing, that's the perfect role. But I think the way things are today, technology is the underpinning of everything we do. There are jobs, there's industries, there's opportunities that we can't even predict at this point in time. If you think back, when was it? Only 2007, the iPhone came out. Everything's changed since then. Everything's changed since then. Think what's coming next. There's so many new things happening. So if you have a passion, explore the opportunities that are out there. Watch TED Talks, see what MIT are publishing. Just devour information and find something that resonates with you and put something forward. See if there are people out there who have a similar mindset, or you can go and work with someone. And there used to be like 5-6 years ago, everyone was like hoping that they would be acquired by Facebook or Google. Well, that's not the case anymore. I think there is enough interesting entities bubbling up. Private equity has so much money. There's so many incubators out there. Go and surround yourselves with people that are like-minded who want to change the world. I've always taken this view, and this sounds very grandiose, but what we do is so significant to where we're going as a species. And again, one of the things that I feel very passionate about is the environmental side of what we do. And that's the underpinning of the ethos of Aligned is our sustainability, environmentals, and all of that. So it's vitally important that, whatever you do, you leave a light touch on the environment. But since I'm very hippie now, so I'm going to stop talking.
so everybody's talking about carbon neutrality. What's your stance on that? And what are you doing to make that happen?
Sorry, I missed that. On cloud neutrality?
No, carbon.
Oh, carbon. Sorry, big one. Yeah. So we have a program. We've been working on a program for that for a while. So we're the company that owns us, Macquarie. That's one of their key cornerstones. So everything we do is about sustainability. The way we procure our equipment, the way we design and build and deploy our technology, the cooling that we uses significantly less energy than anything else on the market to give a much higher yield. So everything we do, all our energy that we deliver to our customers is renewable energy. We're actually in the process of documenting our statement for our carbon neutral stance. And a lot of people are talking about 2030 rather. We're hoping to bring that much closer to be fully carbon neutral. But there's so many elements that touches, from your supply chain, how you operate, even delivering equipment to the site. Moreover, we're looking at technologies that actually remove carbon from the atmosphere and have those situated with our infrastructure. So it's very, very important. We need to do this. I mean, energy that our industry uses is enormous. Over a year ago, it was anticipated that by 2025, we'd be using as much energy as India as a subcontinent. I think that's sort of out the window. We're probably already doing that now.
Absolutely. So where do you get and how do you get your best ideas?
I sort of switch off my frontal lobe by doing silly things, like jumping out of planes.
Here we go. This is the part I've been waiting for.
Or the Cresta run, going down a luge, driving a motorbike fast. Yeah, I let my imagination run wild, and I'm interested in everything. So there's lots of opportunities out there to pick and choose from different ideas of doing things differently.
I was thinking the best ideas that I have come to me in the shower. This guy's jumping out of planes and going down mountains.
Yeah, there's actually people talk about meditation or whatever, but what you're doing, you're basically disassociate, or you're removing the focus from your frontal cortex.
Yeah, I think it's about breaking the barrier.
Yeah,
I think it's about breaking the barrier.
Yeah, you can do that by frightening yourself very, very. Yeah.
I've done that a few times.
See, you've done that to me a few times. It's also how you get rid of the hiccups, ironically.
Absolutely.
I know that.
So let's talk a little bit about how do you continue to learn? What are some of the mediums that you use to learn about technologies and, stuff that you're engaged in?
Yeah. Well, one of the sort of self-serving in this for you guys, but podcasts. I just devour podcasts all the time. I usually play them at 1.5 times speed just to get them through. It's almost like speed reading through my ears, which is interesting. But
I've been told that I speak really, really fast, so I'd be amazed to see if you only hear Nabil's part when you do that on our podcast. I guess I should try it.
Yeah, but yeah, I devour information. I'm constantly reading things, or I'm on the plane a lot, so I download a lot of podcasts and books, and I find TED Talks very interesting because they're so diverse, so that you often come up with different ideas for doing things just by listening to how other people are approaching their world. But
so as an innovator, what's next? From a technology standpoint, is it autonomous vehicles? Is it some other thing that I can't even think about that you invented 20 years ago?
Yeah. Well, I think COVID sort of held us back a bit on autonomous vehicles. So the business model would be that you'd have to have a shared asset base, which is a shame because I think we were very close to being there. I still think that the next big thing that's going to be impactful will be something like a smart spectacles. And they keep talking about that augmented reality, but the ability to have an overlay of the world. To see, so I'd see your face, it would give me background on you, although that's probably going to be hijacked by the ad market. So you'd be walking past.
Exactly.
More than like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It'll just give you my Amazon shopping cart.
Exactly. So I think that's going to be interesting. I do think that what COVID has taught corporations is that they can trust their workforce not to be in one building. So if we see that diaspora of our workforce into places where they want to live and work, obviously there has to be good internet, and things like Starlink that Elon Musk's involved in, that's going to be interesting to have that connectivity everywhere. So there are some key things along those lines high bandwidth connectivity on any medium and any device, the ability to work anywhere, having a blend of augmented reality for these sort of conversations to have that. And I think they're closer than we think. It's just we keep sort of going forward. It's like one step forward, two steps back at the moment. Is the Delta variant going to make a shift? Do we have to do these things?
Some of these buzzwords in the market, like artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, IoT, can you just pick up 3 that, in your opinion, are real?
Well, IoT is real, and IoT connected over 5G is becoming very, very real. But all that data, whether it's processed locally or then pushed back and have some meaningful context. So machine learning is going to be key to that, to make sense and define the patterns that are emerging. So I think that's very, very real. And we're seeing a lot of industry adopt that. I think what's also, and we didn't talk about it, but I think the circular economy is going to be very interesting as well. Taking those products end of life, because our churn is in our industry, everything we do, it's like, I want the latest. So Apple bring out a new phone, I'm going to go and buy it. But that existing technology, being able to reuse that, either the components or in another country, to recycle that technology, I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, I always like asking this question. And that is, many science fictions, they present a dark vision of the future. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of humanity?
I'm always optimistic. I think it's one of my drivers. I always look forward. So I'm more of, and it's interesting, if you're thinking of science fiction, there's and I love Star Wars, but that's a very dystopian worldview. Star Trek is much more optimistic. I'm not really a Trekkie, but I think technology could bring us all together in a much more efficient fashion. We're essentially a tribal species. So once you get beyond a certain number, it sort of starts to break down. But I do think that technology can help. I remember just when, in the early days, I got an Xbox because of the work I did with Microsoft and my kids. I was probably a bad parent. I let them play Halo way too young. But they then surpassed me in expertise by droves. But then when Xbox Live came out, that was interesting, because then, even though they were in their room, but they were talking to their friends. And
there's a social element to it.
Exactly. And that sort of expand. So as long as there's that, you still have that physical connection, because I think it's very important for us as humans to have that physical connection. I don't see a problem with that social media and social communications. I think that the danger is you can get into your own echo chamber, and it can be perverted, as we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's a delicate balance, right? My kids now go to dinner or get together with their cousins, and they'll be sitting next to each other, talking to each other on the iPad through one of those games as the veneer of it. So there is the lost art of conversation amongst our youth that I think has only been accelerated through COVID and the virtualization of school and things like that. That I think hopefully will be rectified if they're able to.
We tend to. It's like a pendulum. We tend to pivot. Yeah, in whatever element. So we'll get to that middle ground.
Yeah, that's the hope. I have one of our final questions. Let's say you have been one of the things that I try to trumpet consistently with the fact that we are the generation that is kind of required to bring the excitement of our industry to the next generation, because we were there. So we have experienced life before the digital kind of infrastructure revolution, and we've experienced life afterwards. And that's why it's all kind of magical and new to us. And that's why it's so exciting to us. And I don't want to sound like Walter Matthau, but kids these days have this certain expectation of technology that it doesn't have that kind of same magical feeling to it. So given the fact that you had the experience incredibly early on in kind of the creation of computers as a fundamental way that we did business, and then certainly have now evolved, is there something that surprised you about the evolution of computers and the way we use them from that kind of first experience you had from the kind of the airport authority through automating, just provisioning what would be a PC or a workstation or whatever, to now having more compute in the palm of your hand than you ever dreamed of when you were working at that company?
Yeah, I'm constantly amazed, frankly, constantly amazed. There's all those stories about the iPhone has more computing power than NASA used, and all of those things. There's so many tropes that you can bring out. But I just think it's going to continue. And I'm constantly excited about what we're going to see in the next 5, 10, 20 years. Having even screens embedded in the walls, having that level of contextual, you walk into a room and it knows you and it presents the information pertinent to you. And I'd love to be involved in all of that. So I think everybody thinks that maybe not so much, but certainly in my experiences, most people think this is the most exciting time they've ever, in human history. But I think this truly is. I think we have the potential to really do something significant here. There's never been anything like the internet ever before in our history.
Thanks, Vint.
Yes, thanks, Vint. Yeah. So once he gets his intergalactic IP with all of that stuff that's going out and finding new planets and solar systems, this is the most exciting time for me. And I have a constant childlike excitement and expectation about what we can do and where we can go.
And you've certainly made our industry and our world a better place. So thank you, and thank you for being with us. This has been an awesome conversation.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
This has been great. Nothing lasts forever. Markets will come back, currencies will rebound, businesses will go on, and we'll all move on. That could happen next week, next month, or next year. I'm confident that those who prepare rather than panic will come out of this stronger. Thank you for joining us. This has been brought to you by Nomad Futurist. Check us online at nomadfuturist.com.